podcast. This week for UFC Vegas 57. The card's headlined by two fighters. Man, a lot of people consider the future of the lightweight division. I know I do. We have Arman Tsarukyan taking on Mateusz Gamrot. A fight well deserving of 5 rounds, in my opinion. In the co-main event, we've got veteran Magny giving undefeated Shavkat Rakhmonov his first crack at the top 10. Should be a very, very good card. Great night of fights. Last week's card, man, was up there with some of the absolute best ever. We had 8 knockouts and a submission, 7 of those in the first round. But yet again, any fight that hit the scorecards, we saw that Texas judging on display again, and it seems like we have to complain about it a little bit every week, but scoring round 4 for Emmett, and man, even 30-27 on my win for Ismagulov are some of the two outrageous scorecards that come to mind for me last week. Both of us would have had a much better night had Cater and DePaula came through, but I said something about it a little earlier in the week. We laid a lot of chalk on fighters we knew basically low finishing upside and we're going to win by decision. So we learn from it, we move on, man. Go ahead real quick and look through some of the good and bad bets we made from last week.
Yeah, we'll take a look at your card first. I think the first fight you want to point out is that Natalia da Silva fight. She looked awesome against Jasmine and definitely covered her price tag and some. Yep. Then taking a look down, I think the Julian Marquez, Gregory Rodriguez fight doesn't go the distance. You weren't even having to lay 2-1 on that. That was an auto bet, and looking back on it, I think both of us should have hit it harder. Like you said, you did get caught up in the DePaula thing along with me. It's just one of those things that, like you said, we just got to move on. It's a low-level women's MMA fight. There shouldn't be much value put into it at all. You ended up the night only minus 1.23 units, and definitely something you can come back from. Looking over at my card, Duran Win was the straight bet. And damn, did he fight for my money, man. He fought for my money, but he really looked much more like a plus 400 as
Phil
that
Hawes
fight played out. Yeah, Phil Hawes, he might be the real deal. I've usually tried to fade him, but he might be the real deal. Mm-hmm. My saving grace on the night was Holland wins inside the distance. That was my biggest play at 2 units.
What a price tag.
Yeah, I mean, it was just insane that they were offering that and him being such a big favorite, all the finishing upside at welterweight for him. Yep. That definitely saved my night. I ended up the night plus 1.15 units, and looking to move that forward into the next week. In our main event, we have 2 lightweight contenders in Arman Tsarukyan versus Mateusz Gamrot. 2 guys that I think arguably could be fighting for the belt in the near future. Here's something I want to throw off right off the bat is I think you could take the Damir Ismagulov fight last week, Guram Kutateladze, Arman, Mateusz Gamrot, have all 4 of them fight each other 100 times and they all come out with the same amount of wins. I honestly believe that. Now you're looking at the price tag for this fight, and Arman's a 3-1 favorite over Gamrot in this matchup, and it just seems extremely wide to me. I understand the hype surrounding Arman, his debut against Islam, and his recent performances. But I look at the level of competition that Arman's been fighting, and I think it's fair to say that the best striker that he's faced up until this point is probably OAM. And I love the Canadian gangster, but he's not in the UFC anymore. And that really is probably the highest level striker he's faced up until this point. He's had a majority wrestling heavy path as far as his matchups go. You got Davy Ramos, who when he's not fighting Islam or Arman, he's shooting for 7-9 takedowns a fight. Steamroller for Vola. Christoph Giagos, who I'll get to later, but I'm fading him this week. And Joel Alvarez, who's known for his willingness to accept the back and fish for submissions. I don't think Gamrot's striking is world-class by any means, but I do think he does a better job of using his wrestling threat to set up those strikes better than anybody that Arman has faced. And he mixes in all those aspects of MMA and is so defensively sound that I think it's rare that we'll ever see Gamrot lose in a convincing fashion. So, this will be Gamrot's 5th 5-round fight. He's 4-0 so far in his career, 3 of those coming by either decision or in the championship rounds. This will be Arman's first time going past the 3rd round in his career. And although he has looked great in his fight, in his later half of his fights, I still think that we're paying juice for the unknown. For how I see it, it could be like a runner in a race. 3-round fight, the finish line in the middle of the 3rd. you can push for that sprint effort, but what this is like a marathon where halfway through, when he's usually able to see the finish line, he's literally halfway through. At 2.5 rounds, he's halfway through the fight, and he's fighting somebody with that experience. I think that Gamrot's physique is also much better for extended fight times. Arman's somebody who carries a lot of muscle, and if he's using his wrestling, I think that is something that could wear on him early. I think that this fight favors Arman, especially if he can find himself on top of Gamrot. But I don't think Gamrot's going to risk much early, and I think it'll likely force those shots out of Arman. And I'm expecting a split decision here. I think after that breakdown, I'm kind of obligated to bet on Gamrot. But ultimately, I do see this fight going to the scorecards, and in a style of fight that Gamrot possesses, I do think that it's made for grease bucket decisions. So I'm going to go with Gamrot and by split decision. I just can't see why Arman's a 3-1 favorite here.
So, man, I want to start by basically kind of reiterating best two of the prospects at lightweight for me. You look at their regional level prior to the UFC, they fought at a much higher level than a lot of guys did. And when they have to debut, one debuts against Shavkat Rakhmonov and one debuts against Islam. There's no easy fights for these guys. Both of them struggle to get matchups with the higher ranked guys in the division. So I love that they're just putting them together. Mm-hmm. And, man, like you said, probably fighting for a title down the road. I would not be surprised if we see a rematch between these guys down the road. Tsarukyan, for me, man, he's a guy that's it's hard for me to see holes in the guy's game. I've seen him competitively wrestle with Islam, take Joel down and just beat him up with elbows on the feet or on the ground. And his striking, Tiger Muay Thai, man, he's so technical with everything he throws. The left hook on Yagos, the head kick that got him into the UFC, and he does a really mean calf kick. And wrestlers like Gamrot are very heavy on that lead leg, and we saw Diego Ferreira have a ton of success with that calf kick early on Gamrot. He also has a ton of forward pressure, and if he's someone that's going to push Gamrot backwards, and those takedown attempts from Gamrot are going to be coming off the back foot, I think Arman's going to be seeing him from a mile away. You did kind of voice my one concern for him. He carries a lot of muscle, and it's an extended fight, but he's also only 5'7", and I've kind of said it like Topuria, I think get the weight under control when you're a very dangerous featherweight. The Yagos fight, he was kind of out-muscled on a sloppy takedown attempt, and a wrestler like Gamrot, that does give me concern, but on the feet, I think this 100% is Tsarukyan's world. I think Gamrot's a very mediocre striker and was losing basically any minute at range with Shavkat Rakhmonov. I see pretty much a similar thing here. And outside of the Shavkat Rakhmonov fight, going to go in on Gamrot a little bit. His fight over Scott Holtzman. Holtzman's 38 years old, was coming off a TKO loss. Jeremy Stephens, 36 years old, coming off a TKO loss and was cut. Diego Ferreira, 37 years old, was coming off a TKO loss, and we basically saw him beat by the same exact style of fighter just previously in Gregor Gillespie. So I basically knew exactly what was going to happen in that fight. So, for Gamrot, I just really haven't seen him tested at another highly prospect level, and I just saw Arman go beat the absolute brakes off of Joel. So I think Arman should be the decent favorite here, but the 5-round cardio, the weaselness of Gamrot, it does worry me a little bit, and the more I think about it, I do think it hits the scorecards. In our co-main event, we have Neil Magny taking on Shavkat Rakhmonov. With Neil Magny, he's been a moneymaker for me. Kind of been like my male Caitlin Chukagian almost. Is going to always hoorah his way to decision and beat you on the scorecards, but if you're a step down for Magny, he's going to beat you. If you're like the old time, out of your prime, like Robbie Lawler, Johnny Hendricks, Carlos Condit, he's going to beat you, But really, if you look down through it, Jeff Neal might be the best one, and you weaseled out a decision, And then last time out, I thought Max Griffin was going to be that step down. It was going to be that easy win for me, Magny by decision. Man, did he make me sweat it. Got dropped in round one, was getting a leg chewed up, and I expected a much cleaner performance from Neal, and if that Neal shows up in this fight, I think Shavkat is going to get him out of there. He's a prospect that I've cashed on all 3 times in the UFC so far inside the distance. He trains out of Sanford MMA, 15-0 as a pro, and has finished all 15 of those wins. It's hard to find an area where this guy, is weak and put together a game plan to exploit. He's also one of the welterweights that's going to, have the size comparison to Magny a little bit that can match him there. He's a better striker with good forward pressure, and if Magny's not the one on his front foot going forward, he tends to not have a lot of success. Big area for me, Magny likes to work a lot of the clinch work and kind of grind on you. Shavkat's cardio really hasn't been tested yet. I know Magny, that's the one thing that he can test. Mm-hmm. I've opted to take the Shavkat money line and not inside the distance, even though it's a much better price tag. Historically, Magny's been a pretty durable guy that's, been reliant to stretch the fight over the full 15 minutes. So it worries me that Shavkat could see his first 15-minute fight here, taking such a big step up into the top 10. But Shavkat is going to be the pick, man. How about yourself?
Yeah, so interesting matchup for sure, and I'm on the absolute opposite side. I've never been a real big fan of Magny, and half of it's because of the fight style where he kind of makes a fight boring, and the other half is because I'm never on the right side of him. Thankfully this week I do think that it's a pretty safe play with Rakhmonov. Shavkat, since that debut against Alex Oliveira, definitely has that mystique about him, as Khamzat Chimaev, just like an unbeatable, huge powerhouse. Not just going to beat you, but break you as well. I hold the same sentiment on Magny's record. It sucks to say because he is such a, maybe even a Hall of Famer of the sport, a true veteran, but he hasn't had the best wins. They're not aging very well. And, like you said, the size advantage of Magny is probably going to be negated, as well as being out-muscled. So very similar to that Michael Chiesa fight, I think Rakhmonov's going to be able to control where the fight takes place and the pace that he wants to go. And up until this point, it's been 0 to 100 with that pace, and he's looking for that finish quickly. I'm actually on the opposite side where I'm looking for a prop to play here. The sub line is definitely interesting to me. Magny, he's been subbed a few times in the past, and Rakhmonov has shown that he has that nasty squeeze. I do think it should be a relatively easy fight for Rakhmonov. I kind of, I'm at this point where is Magny going to be the Li Jingliang that Chimaev had to fight, where it's just breaking that top 10, or is he going to be a Gilbert Burns where it really pushes him and makes him go that full 15 minutes? I tend to lean towards that Jingliang thing, so I do think that this will be a pretty easy fight for Rakhmonov, and he should find a finish in the first or second round like he has his entire career.
Nice to see we're on the same side.
For my fight of the night, I'll be taking Raulian Paiva versus Sergey Morozov. Initially, I wanted to play Morozov, especially when I saw his price tag, but then I remembered my 5 or 6 unit bet I had on him against Silva de Andrade, and I swore I'd lay off of this fight because there's no way I can look at this without some bias. It just seems like a trap fight in my eyes. Paiva, he's been on the tail end of some decisions and the right side of some decisions, and that tells me one thing. He's very similar to Mateusz Gamrot or Mateusz Nicolau, and the fact that he can just make any fight close. Outside of that Sean O'Malley fight, he's really good at making these fights close. He has an excellent takedown defense at 75%. He's long for the division. And even though he is at 135 now, I do think that he's young and still kind of growing into his body. And I think that he can make some pretty significant improvements in a very short amount of time, just where he's at, the level of competition he's facing. Morozov, he's faced competition faced tough competition since the regional scene, fighting guys like Josh Reddinghouse or Movsar Evloev. And he's still taking on that stout competition in the UFC. Both guys coming off of, KO losses at that, and it's a little concerning. I got to think that Sergey's KO was a little worse. I say KO. He got knocked down 3 times. Right. I know it was a submission, but the dude got concussed 3 times. I just think that this is a fight where it was 3 months ago. He immediately wants to get back, avenge that loss. And it's a tough spot for me because I do think that Morozov is the more skilled of the 2 fighters, but he does have the red flag with his recent loss. The fact he's going up against somebody like Paiva, who known for that decision thing, and the fact that Paiva's getting bet down. It's like somebody knows something that this should be much more of a 50-50 price. They've got Morozov sitting at like minus 140, which is just low enough that I really do want to take a stab, but I feel like the best move is just to sit back and enjoy this fight.
Couldn't have said it better myself, man. You and I are pretty much coming on the same side. I think it's extremely tough for me to get a read on. And as of right now, I have laid off Paiva. Dude's tough as hell. You can absolutely eat the shots on the feet and still be there in round 3 with a good gas tank, man, to make the fights close. Really, over his last 7-fight strand since breaking onto the UFC, he's got one decisive win over Mark De La Rosa, who he finishes. Mark's 0-4 in the UFC before he got cut, and outside of every fight there, he's lost, and then the fights that he wins over Nascimento, Kyler Phillips, Zumagulov, they're all in question, to be honest with you. There's a very well case that Paiva has won in his last 7 fights or something on any other given night. So one of those guys where I necessarily don't see the greatest skill set there, but some toughness that can make a lot of fights close. Mm-hmm. Team Alpha Male, where he trains, is always known for getting some generous love from the scorecards as well. And also known for having some pretty good wrestling, but I think that is the area that Sergey will probably be able to exploit the most. No shame in losing to Umar. I thought he bounced back great, looked good against Taha, and like you were joking earlier, basically 10-6 D'Andrade, in round 1. That's always kind of in the back of my head as well. He's also been rear naked choked, I think 3 times. His last 3 losses are by rear naked choke, so jiu-jitsu might let him down, might give up his back a little bit. I think he's going to have to wrestle a hard 15 minutes here because I think Paiva's good at stretching the fights out, and that's what's kind of keeping me off laying Sergey here. But yeah, man, Sergey's going to be the pick for me too. For my fight of the night, I'm going to go with action man Chris Curtis taking on Rodolfo Vieira. Open up a main card, and it's a good one, man. I don't think it goes the full 15 minutes at all. For Chris Curtis, I was kind of wondering when this is going to happen. The guy kind of comes into the UFC on short notice after being snubbed a couple years back. And was an underdog in both the fights. He gets, an underdog knockout, and now we see him opening as the -180 favorite. I'm torn on if I think it's a little bit market overcorrection or not. He is a good boxer, but I primarily consider him like a counter boxer. I don't necessarily think he's the one usually going forward, laying in the power and laying in the offense, but he does have some sneaky power, and he likes to touch your body as well, which is going to pay dividends on a guy who, Vieira, has seen some gas tank issues. Halls and Allen were guys that probably had a grappling upside, but for some reason, just didn't use it. And I know Vieira is going to use it here, and as an underdog, it makes it a little bit tempting. The style has caused Chris Curtis issues in the past, and it's a level of jiu-jitsu that he's just not seen before. The only issue, again, is Rodolfo's ability to grapple for an extended period of time. Maybe it was an anomaly, but round 1 against Fluffy is always going to be in the back of your head. He had about 3.5 minutes worth of gas, and that's it. And that does worry me. But I do think with Chris Curtis not being that offensive output guy, I think he's going to get backed against the cage a little bit. I do think he's going to find himself on the back. I think it's going to be dog or pass for me here. I don't necessarily want to bet Chris Curtis as the favorite when he's been a pretty big underdog in his last couple. But I'm not going to be running to the window to bet Rodolfo Vieira. He's really hard to back, but I like the grappling upside he has. I think my best advice would possibly maybe be to a Chris Curtis live bet, in between rounds 1 or 2 if he was able to make it there.
Yeah, so this is a great fight to pick out for the fight of the night because you're right, it does seem pretty binary. Either Chris Curtis is going to knock out Rodolfo or Rodolfo is going to find that submission. And we see it reflected in the line. The fight doesn't go to decision is -750. So they know that there's going to be a finish. Mm-hmm. And it's here you read off Curtis wins by TKO. It's only 10 points different than his money line. It's a -120. Then Vieira wins by TKO plus 1,200. Curtis by submission plus 2,000. Vieira by submission plus 2-1. I think that Curtis is going to finish. They think that Curtis is going to finish this. And to be getting a price tag at -135, and they know setting the inside the distance line that it is going to get finished and that Curtis is the favorite to get the finish. I think that it's a pretty interesting. I think it's just an interesting line that they've got all the rest of the ways to finish at such high price tags. Yeah, so I don't know. I think it's going to be a great fight, but I lean Chris Curtis, and I really want to play him. But you're right, this is kind of a huge step up in competition, and the past grappling issues he's shown, it does give you a little bit of reserve. But I do think that Chris Curtis is the side.
Well, he opened minus 180, minus 135 now, so it looks like if you're just going to continue to wait, very well might get that at a great price tag.
For my fighter to watch, I'll be taking JP Bays. A guy that I gotta imagine's coming into this week with a chip on his shoulder. After Roman Dolidze's performance last week, I gotta think that he wants to one-up him. So I actually think that JP Bays has a pretty good chance of winning this fight against Cody Durden. Not been a big Cody Durden fan. And as far as I can tell, this is going to be a grappler versus grappler. It'll probably just come down to cardio, and I end up favoring JP Bays. I think that early on, JP Bays also will have the physical advantage. I think that he's like, physique-wise, about as perfect as you could get for 135. Is this at 125? Okay, yeah, at 125. It was a mistake him going up to 135 against Montel Jackson. So coming back down to this weight class, and Cody Durden having just recently getting KO'd by my boy Muhammad Mukayev, I do think that this is set up for JP Bays to finally get a win, and maybe even the UFC is gifting this fight to him.
Good guy to keep your eyes on, man. With all the octagon situation outside, like you talked about, a very bad performances back to back from him. He is in a hard spot here with his back up against the wall. I'm hoping for a good performance from him as well. Fighter to watch, I'm going to go Brian Kelleher. He's taking on Mario Batista on Saturday, and he's sitting at the plus 135 underdog. I didn't choose him from an underdog because right now I've chose to stay away. He's 35 years old. His last two fights have been at 145 and not 135. So it's been like well over a year since he's made that weight cut to 135, I believe. And I'm just kind of holding off to kind of see what that weight cut looks like for him. But he's got 37 professional fights compared to Mario Batista's 11. There's going to be a massive experience edge that Kelleher has going into this. And throughout his UFC tenure, just look at who Kelleher's lost to. He's lost to Chito Vera, John Lineker, Montel Jackson, Cody Stamen, Ricky Simone, and Umar. And, outside of Jackson and Umar, every one of those guys have been ranked in the top 10 of one of the best divisions in the sport. And I think Jackson and Umar are one of the prospects that really do have some top 20 upside. So Kelleher has not lost to a guy like Mario Batista in the UFC so far. He's got big power. He swings big hooks. Mario's there to be hit. We've seen Trevin Jones put him away. And then now we've seen Kelleher add this wrinkle of wrestling to his game in his last couple fights. The fight I want to draw a comparison to, the Miles Johns fight with Batista, it's a shorter opponent, and we never got to see that wrestling play out. So that's something I wish I would have gotten to see. It would kind of give me a better indication of if Kelleher was going to have some success with it here. Because the last two guys he has fought, they've been taller, lankier guys, bigger than him, that he's just been able to wrestle with ease. So I think at plus 135, before the weight cut, things tempting, man, and somebody to keep your eye on.
Yeah, man, I like that you brought up that he's only lost to the highest level of competition, and this does kind of seem like a proving ground for Mario Bautista here, because Kelleher on that same token, he's never really beat anybody that's you could arguably say is better than Mario Bautista. Right. So this is like a great opportunity for him to kind of take on his role as gatekeeper and prove whether or not Bautista is at that level. My underdog of the week is Lil Monster, Vanessa Demopoulos. I think that this line is just insanely wide, man. It's not necessarily that I think that Vanessa Demopoulos is a top tier level fighter by any means, but she is still 33 years old, young in her MMA career. And I do think that she's making improvements. Defensively, she's not very sound, but I don't think you have to be too defensively sound to beat Jinyu Frey. Jinyu Frey's, yeah, and Adam Waite, who really only has a couple of power shots, and she's had to incorporate some wrestling to start getting these wins. And they're not wins over good people at all. They're Ashley Yoder and Gloria DePaula, who. Damn, Gloria DePaula sucks.
So does Ashley Yoder.
Yeah, for Jinyu Frey to be 37 years old And not 2 years ago, having losses to Kay Hansen and Loma Lookboonmee. And then now she's coming in against any girl in the UFC as a 3-1 favorite. It just, I think that the line's way off. And how many times do we have to see these low level women's MMA fights that are mislined with an upset win? So I personally think that Vanessa Demopoulos, she's going to have to watch out for the power punches. But for what it's worth, she does eat shots well. She wears damage well. And I do think that she can fight through enough of that to start getting her game going. It's going to be a dog fight, but I do think that Vanessa can come out on top of this 50% of the time.
I don't hate it, man. Toughness in women's MMA can get you a lot of places. You know, if you're able to walk through those punches and get to those girls and get your grappling going the way Pena did, Nunes and things, it can work. And that's kind of what I'm seeing here. I think she's going to walk through some of those shots, and she's going to be the one to get her grappling going. Vanessa, she is a girl that I think is going to have the grappling advantage here, and we've seen Jinyu Fry struggle with it before with girls like Kay Hansen and stuff as well on the mat. So, plus, what is it, 250, 300, something like that?
Yeah.
Great underdog, man. I hope you get that ticket. For me, underdog, going to go against your motivated JP Baez. I'm going to take Cody Durden for my dog here, man. Both guys desperately need a win. You know, Cody has lost 2 of his last 3. I think JP a little bit more needs to win, a little bit more desperately here, as I think the UFC is willing to give you a pass if you're willing to fly over to London and take over this 21-year-old, incredible prospect in Mokaev like Cody Durden did. Durden's also fought a lot of his professional career at 135. Combine that with the small size advantage he, already is going to have in this matchup. I think Cody's going to be stronger in the wrestling positions where I think this fight could take place. A lot of them, both of them have the South African wrestling background. Durden's got the wrestling here. And in terms of the wrestling, I just going to think the American wrestling over a South African wrestling. I think there's going to be levels to it, and I think Cody Durden's going to be the better wrestler here. In terms of the striking, Durden's also got a little bit underrated boxing. You see the boxing, bouts on his professional record and stuff as well. And to see JP knocked down 7 times in his last 2 UFC outings, combined with another TKO loss earlier in his record, questioning the ability to take a shot at 125 is not something that you really like to see, where Cody Durden's, granted it was not that long ago, wasn't it like a flying knee or something like that called him, before he went to the ground? So it's like, that's going to drop a lot of people, JP does have his back up against the wall, though, and that's a dangerous person to fight right now. But I think the odds makers are letting that Mokaev loss overshadow this line a little bit. I think you take that away, and I think Cody Durden comes in here probably at like the minus 150, minus 160 range. It's bottom-level flyweights, man. I don't advise going too heavy. The gas tank from Cody Durden is what's caused me to not want to back him here. The Gutierrez fight where he's like up 10-8 in round 1, ends up a draw because his gas tank. You go to the Richie Lang fight in round 3 where his gas tank is shit again. Don't want to back him too heavy, but I think Cody Durden for my dog of the week.
For my prop of the card, I'm going to be taking the Carlos Olberg, Tafon, and Chukwi fight doesn't go to decision at minus 200. It hasn't opened up on FanDuel or DraftKings for us, but it looks like the market's showing minus 200. And I don't think that there's a way that this fight sees the judges, honestly. Both guys, stand-up specialists, Tafon coming off of a awful knockout. And Olberg's more than willing to eat some shots, to give some shots. I think that stylistically it's perfect for some absolute violence. I know we kind of mentioned talking about the ends in KO prop, but until we see that, I think minus 200 is more than enough for me to put that into parlays or even lay straight money on that, just because I really don't see this going to the judges.
I mean, much like my Rodriguez and Marquez fight, minus 196 last week, man, there was not a single moment in that fight I thought it was going to see the full 15 minutes. Right. And if you feel that same way, man, hit it. For me, God help us, Alan Baudot by decision plus 425. I see a lot of action on this fight, and God help you if you were laying 2 and 3 units on one of these fighters. But I am a degenerate gambler, so I thought I'd try to find some action on this fight as well, When breaking it down, I don't know if there's a lower level heavyweight on the roster between these two. Parisian is 0-3 in the UFC. Baudot is also 0-3 in the UFC, but really should be 0-4 in his last couple. Both, desperately need a win. But you remember when Vanessa Mello and Sarah Moras fought each other, and then they just cut them both?
Yes.
I could see the similar situation here, man. With Badeau, I think he's got a serious speed advantage on the feet compared to Parisian. I think early on in this fight, you'll see him have a ton of success. Incrementally, I think, despite losing, I think we've seen Badeau look a little bit better. You kind of throw the Aspinall fight out the window. But then, in the Nascimento fight, you're like, oh, shit, he's actually looking better. And Nascimento finally gets him out of there, but then pops. And then in the fight with Parker Porter, he almost hurts Parker Porter. It actually goes to full 15 minutes, looks a little bit better. Parisian, on the other hand, you see him debut against Parker Porter, throw like 100-something strikes, look kind of decent. Mm-hmm. And then since then, man, he's just looked like crap. Should have lost to Roque Martinez. And then to just get wrestled the way you did by a boxer in Dontel Mays, I think Parisian is the one that possibly has the grappling upside here, but I just don't know how much. Odds makers see it a 50-50 fight. That's pretty much how I see it. But I think the low-level heavyweights go 15 minutes time and time again, and to get plus 425 on the guy that I slightly lean, I'll take it.
My best bet of the week is going to be Thiago Moises' money line. I actually played it straight for 4.5 units, but I think right now we're looking at just under 3-1, and I think that it's a perfect parlay piece. To me, this is the UFC's gimme fight to Thiago Moises. They're thanking him. He's 27 years old, and he's already had to fight Benil Dariush, Demiraz Magulov, Islam Makhachev, and Yoel Alvarez. Like, they're handing him this victory right here to get him back on track. Mm-hmm. He's beaten the guys who aren't, like, upper echelon in the UFC, the Michael Johnsons, the Bobby Greens, the Alexander Hernandezes. Like, those are all legitimate fighters, and he's coming out with the dub there. Christos Giagos is not a legitimate fighter. I do think that he's on his last leg with the UFC, and after this loss, I can't imagine them keeping him for too much longer. Giagos is the guy where, you can get some absurd lines against Sean Soriano by submission because nobody expects anything from him. Here, I think he's just going to be outmatched. Now, Tsarukyan made easy work of him, and we kind of expect that. But I really do think that Thiago Moises is the side here, and it's just the UFC's way of thanking him for taking all these tough fights.
Yeah, man, I'm with you. I got Moises like last week as well. I put him in a parlay. I think he's a very comfortable person to bet on this week. Look at his last 3 wins. Damir Hasdovich, Carlton Minus, Sean Soriano. They're very, very low level. I do not think he has the skills to beat Thiago Moises. And, when you're losing Jakar Close and Arman Tsarukyan, like, what are you really doing to deserve a fight with Thiago Moises in the first place? Again, I think it's a step down the UFC has given him to kind of get back on track for taking on all those tough fights. I like that. Best bet for me, I'm going to go Nurmagomedov, and Manis doesn't go the distance. Going to be somewhere around minus 180 to like minus 200 I'm seeing out there on different books. And it's virtually the same price tag as you're getting Umar inside the distance. I see him at like minus 165, minus 170. So you get both sides here. Might as well just lay a little bit extra and take that. Manis, you've seen the dog in him. He's been the underdog in his last 2. He's gutted out wins. He's been hurt and come back. So he has the ability to do so. But all 3 of those wins, he's 3-0 in the UFC. All 3 of them, I can put a little asterisk beside him. Technically, I thought he lost the Johnny Munoz Jr. fight. He gives up like 10 minutes of control time. He's saved by the bell, if I remember correctly. And giving all that control time to Johnny Munoz, not what you want to see against a wrestler like Umar, And then Luke Sanders basically piecing him up, drops him until he gassed. And then same with Gravely. Gravely drops him. He's saved by the bell, and basically Gravely's gas tank lets him down. And so, Nate's wins are kind of opponent's mistakes a little bit, in my opinion. And if Umar comes in here and makes a mistake, if he does gas out, has a tough weight cut, Manis has that dog in him and could potentially finish him late. But I do think that's a slim chance of it happening. I think from like Morozov to Kelleher to now Manis, again, I know Manis is 3-0, but I think that's honestly a step down, a low output counter boxer. It's not the style of fight that it's going to beat Umar. So I'm expecting Umar to get him out there get him out of there probably by submission within the first 1 or 2 rounds. I just think that wrestling's on a different level.
And like you said, he is 3-0, but it just seems like another setup fight for him. Mm-hmm. He is kind of the UFC poster boy with the Nurmagomedov name. Why not give him these wins that are seemingly on paper really good wins against a 3-0 fighter in the UFC? But we both know that Nate Manis is kind of hanging on by a thread and maybe had some lucky rolls. For our quick pick section, we start off the night with Jinyu Fry taking on Vanessa Demopoulos in the strawweight division. And I am going with Little Monster, Vanessa Demopoulos.
Oh, damn. I'll ride with you. I'll ride with you. Give me Vanessa. Not that I don't necessarily know if she wins, man, but that line is wide. It's very wide, and it's going to be close. Mario Batista versus Brian Kelleher. Man, I'll just take my fighter to watch. Give me Kelleher as the dog.
I'll go with Bautista. I do think he's just above that threshold of mediocre fighter. So I am going to give him the nod. Moving on, we go to the flyweight division where we see Cody Durden versus JP Bays, and I think we're going head to head on this one as well. I'm going JP Bays here. I think that he'll just be a little bit stronger and will be able to outlast him.
I'm going to go Cody Durden, man. I think the round 3 could get a little sketch like they have been, but I think he should be up 2 hopefully going into it. But I know we've also talked about all the finishes these guys have had, and you can get the under at plus money. It's flyweights. That's why we haven't really jumped on it, but it is a line worth noting. Mm-hmm. Raulian Paiva and Sergey Morozov, this is at 35. I don't like Paiva at 35. I think he's going to give up a bunch of strength to the wrestler. Take Sergey.
I'll take Sergey as well, but with a lot of caution, man. Moving on to the featherweight division, we have TJ Brown versus Shailin Nerdenbeke. And this is another one where you're getting that under at a really good price tag. I do think that this one has violence written all over it, so we're keeping our eyes out for that. But I am going to lean TJ Brown here. I think that he'll be able to get him down, and I do think that he'll be able to implement his game.
Yeah, picking TJ Brown is one thing. Laying minus 210 on TJ Brown is another thing. TJ Brown's going to be the pick, but going to be a complete pass unless we look at that under. Tayfon Nchukwi versus Carlos Ulberg. I think it's a strike. I think it's going to be a kickboxing fight. Despite Carlos Ulberg being inexperienced in MMA, you look at Tayfon's record, he's not that much more experienced. And in a strike kickboxing fight, I'm going to go with the experience of Ulberg. I think I like him to get Tayfon out of there.
Yeah, I think my girlfriend's going to be a very happy woman this weekend. I think Carlos Ulberg is also going to get the dub. Moving on to the middleweight division, Chris Curtis versus Rodolfo Vieira. Trying to hold myself back from laying some money on Chris Curtis right here. I think that Chris Curtis is probably Rodolfo's best competition to date, and Rodolfo has a loss. I don't know. I love fading Rodolfo in all fairness, so that's something I got to look out for, but I am going to go Chris Curtis here.
Who has the clearest path to victory for me, and I think it's Rodolfo with his grappling, and at plus money it makes it a little interesting. I'll go head-to-head with you. I'll take Rodolfo. Umar, Nate Maness. Umar, inside the distance.
Yeah, I've got Umar as well. Nate Maness, a Tennessee boy.
Kentucky, maybe Tennessee.
He's close to us. I don't know.
He's losing on Saturday.
Yeah, well, I wouldn't hate it. It wouldn't be the worst thing. But yes, I've got Nurmagomedov as well. Moving on, we go to the lightweight division. Thiago Moises, Christoph Giagos. I got Moises all day.
Got Moises as well. Interested in the sub prop, right?
Mm-hmm.
Think we're looking at that. Josh Parisian versus Alan Baudot. I gave up prop for Baudot by decision. God help us again, man.
Yeah, we're in for a shit show on this one, but I am going on the opposite side of you. I'm going Josh Parisian here. I just think he's the true heavyweight, and I imagine his size will probably get him the dub. Moving on to the co-main event, we have Neil Magny versus Shavkat Rakhmonov. I've got Rakhmonov, and I think he'll get the finish as well.
Got Rakhmonov. I'm on the fence about the finish, but he's finished all 15 of the other ones, so it wouldn't shock me by no means. Arman Tsarukyan versus Mateusz Gamrot. I am high on Arman here, man. I'm gonna go Arman Tsarukyan.
I'm gonna go Mateusz Gamrot. I think it'll be an absolute grease bucket decision, but I'll lean Gamrot here.
We're in for an absolute treat Saturday in that main event, man. And the co-main event, 3 of the best prospects in their divisions and their rightful divisions there. I appreciate you guys tuning in with us. If you haven't already, please like the video, subscribe to the channel. Let us know who you guys have in the main event as well. We'll see you guys next week.
Peace.